Welcome, 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 everyone. Friedemann Findeisen here from Holistic Songwriting. Welcome to our little live stream. A couple of things before we get into the whole thing. We have a lot of songs to cover today, and we are going to cover all of them. So this is going to be a labor-intensive episode for me because the song reviews are quite challenging to do. All right, so a couple of things. This is going to be the last live stream before Christmas and possibly of the year even. I'm not quite sure when I'm going to be back yet, but possibly only after New Year's Eve. So in the meantime, I'm going to do a couple of podcasts. So for every week that I'm not here, since you're not getting a live stream, which is what you're paying for, I'm going to do a podcast. The first one is going to be about my top 10 or just my favorite books in songwriting and otherwise that have to do with, being a more professional musician or professional in general. So it's those two things, nonfiction books. And the other episode, the other podcast, you can now vote on in the on the Patreon on a thread there. So basically, you can just ask me whatever, and I will list based if possible, because those are the easiest formats to do for podcasts. Those are really format friendly, I would say. So if you have any suggestions for a list that I could be talking about, whether that's as books or plugins, as someone already suggested. Feel free to leave that under there, and if you like someone else's suggestion, please also leave a like so I kind of know what you guys are most interested in. I know it's not a perfect representation because someone might come in late with a comment and so they naturally don't get as many hearts, but still, like what you think is interesting, and I'm still going to pick freely, and the other stuff I might just turn into a YouTube video. For next year, I already have planned to go back to YouTube and do some more intensive songwriting stuff, which I haven't done so much in the last quarter or so. So, good. I think that's pretty much it. That covers it. So vote on whichever podcast you'd be interested in. And it's going to be like a longer podcast. So I'm thinking like 45 minutes per episode or something like that, right? Maybe it's going to be a little bit shorter, maybe a little bit longer, who knows? But that's kind of what I'm aiming for. All right. Now we are going to look at some questions. Let's see. We have some questions for the live stream today. I said last Saturday we're only going to do songs this week, but back then I thought we were still going to do the live stream this Saturday. That's not going to happen, unfortunately. So we're just going to do an extra long episode today, and we're going to do the whole bunch. Okay. So let's start with a question by Jordan, who says, "So sorry for the confusion last week. Here again is my question. I hope this is clearer. How should you handle demo production if you're an artist wanting your music to appeal to one specific producer, so that you're showcasing the value of what you bring to the table as an artist, while maintaining a space for his artistry as a producer? Mine has a philosophy: if an artist comes to me and is fully self-contained, they don't need me." Gotcha. How would you go about balancing the need to have a well-produced demo, like we're always talking about here on HS, in order to be competitive as a songwriter today, and also leave space for the producer to hear that there is a need for what he brings to the table? Okay, completely different question. Last time I got your question wrong because I assumed that you were a producer and you were looking for artists to work with, and it's the other way around. You're an artist looking for producers to work with. Okay, so here's what I would say. I think your demos should always be as good as possible. If your demo sounds like the final thing, great. That just means your producer will have to work even harder to make it sound fantastic. You're paying him for something, and if he hears that the thing sounds really good, well, if he can't make it better, then what is he doing there, So my advice would really just be, unless you have someone that you're really close with that really understands the sound that you're going for, in which case it can be really beneficial to say, like, you know what, I'm just going to do a super rough demo, maybe even just record to tape recorder or, something comparable to that, like your cell phone or something. Having some super simple demo recording, just like, hey, here's the music and here's the melody and the chords and the lyrics. That's all I'm giving you. The rest is up to you. And like, I trust you. I know you like my sound. I know I like your sound. And if there is this trust going on, if that's possible for the two of you, maybe you're really working together and the two of you are an artist duo, so to say, then that can work totally fine. In most other cases, though, I would argue that it's usually better to work on your own demo to make sure that your demo sounds as much as the finished product as possible. And that is because a couple of reasons. First of all, you're forcing the producer to work harder. Secondly, you know what you want out of your song. I get a lot of songs here on Holistic Songwriting where I find it very, very challenging to judge whether they're actually well written because the production really, really gets in the way. And I know for myself that I have songs that I'm writing where I'm like, well, it doesn't sound right, but it could be the production and I'm really not sure. And so oftentimes the production can really get in the way of judging whether the songwriting is actually any good. Same thing, I get a lot of productions from people or demo recordings from people that are just so sloppily recorded that I feel like they don't even know what they're writing exactly. Like sometimes a line is rhythmically so unclear that I'm like, well, were they clear what the rhythm is supposed to be, or did they just sing it sloppily, or is what's going on here? You should be clear about every single note in your song. You should be clear about all of your rhythms, about all of your lyrics. You shouldn't mumble anything. And when you record your demos well, if you make sure you put in the work, then that's not going to happen. And you're going to make sure that every single thing is as it should be. That doesn't mean you can't still get creative in the production process later on. And, I've worked with producers I gave them some very finished demos and we still went back to the song and turned it into something completely different. That can totally happen. But I think if you put the time into your demos, it really makes the whole song better just because you have to think about all those details. Thirdly, if you're able to produce a demo in such a way, that means, first of all, you understand what the producer is doing. That gives you a much better insight into their process. And it means you can argue better, you can give feedback better, and not just like speak in hollow phrases. That I think is quite important. And it also allows you to express yourself in production talk, so to say. You know how sound design works. It's easier to work with you if you're yourself a producer, and if you can reach a certain level by yourself, because everyone can record to a smartphone. But being able to understanding what the process is like is quite a different challenge. I've worked with both complete amateurs in a studio that are fantastic singers and people who are not as great singers that are just really versed in recording themselves. And I know who I like working with more. It doesn't mean the result is going to be the same. And usually, it takes just a lot more coaching for those people who have no experience in the studio. And usually I can get it to a pretty good result. But the people who have a lot of experience with studio work typically are easier to work with. And usually the result is very, very good because you can just get very creative very quickly with them because they understand what the process is like. They understand that you just need one single take that's good. That's something that takes a while to wrap your head around when you start recording yourself. You just need one singular take that's good. So instead of playing every single one of those takes safe, which is what most people do, everyone wants to have the perfect take, and so they're very careful and they're playing like this on the guitar. The people that really get how recording works, they play like this, and the strings are like buzzing around, and there's a bunch of noise, and it's really they're out of those 10 takes, 9 are really imperfect, but 1 is really special, and so that's a big difference. Also with singers, they know just how to put in the right amount of effort. With beginners, they often put in too much effort or then too little. It's the curve is usually they put in a lot of effort and then it gets less and less and less. And with professional singers who've worked in the studio before, it usually starts a little bit lower, but it stays there. It stays constant like that, energy-wise. And so there's a bunch of interesting differences here and there. But as I would say, I think my biggest thing, though, is you understand the language better. You get to work creatively on your own project before you send it off. And you can just capture the magic with that song. I know it's tempting to just say, like, you know what, I'm going to spend 4 hours on this and let the producer do all the work. But I think it really makes you a better writer if you spend that time with your song and make sure that it sounds fucking great before you send it off. And so that they have to just sprinkle a little bit of salt on it and it's done, And that salt is really difficult. Finding the right salt for your song is quite tricky. And that's the real challenge. That's why you're hiring a producer, right? But ideally, you want your producer to do very little work. It should be like, tweaking this a little bit here, tweaking that a little bit there. And that is, I think, what really a great producer can do to your songs. It's not completely changing them, although that's possible too. There's producers who have a very strong voice and who will do that to your song. They will completely change the voice. And that can be great. Like I have some older songs that we're still working on and that are about 1.5 years old now, or 1 year old now, actually. And it's great to work with a producer who's very creative, because he can really turn that song around and make it interesting for me again, you know, because it just grew very stale on me. I'm just like, oh, I've heard that song way too many times. But now I'm getting back into it, because he's turning it into something that's a little bit different, and he's adding his own twist to it. Anyways, that will be my answer for that. Jordan has another question. He says, when you talk about transcribing various pieces of music, do you do that all by hand, or do you use any kind of software utilities to assist? I'm referring to how you go about figuring out what you're hearing rather than what you use to actually notate, chart, tab, score. I do everything by hand and everything by ear. So my melodies are all by ear. Chords, I sometimes use my guitar, and that's it. So I mean, I made a course on ear training, so I feel like I should be up for that. And it's actually my favorite part of the process with the artist series. Just transcribing stuff is really fun for me. I just really enjoy that process, and notating it afterwards. I'm using Notion for that, in case you're interested. A very simple program. Notion is definitely easier to use than Sibelius or Finale, even though those are definitely more professional programs. But for the quick and dirty work that I usually do, in terms of notation, Notion is really my favorite so far. Yeah, so it's all, and I'm using the exact techniques that I'm teaching in the ear training challenge that you can get on my website. Okay, Nico has a question. When you record an acoustic guitar with a built-in mic plugged directly into your audio interface, do you still have to take the room acoustics into account? Yes. Yes. To a certain degree, yes, you do. I would personally be very careful about recording with a built-in mic to begin with, though, because typically the sound in there is not the best you could get out of your guitar. Because it's inside the guitar, right? So there's a lot of bass there. It's not necessarily the best sound you could get. Typically the best sound you get from an acoustic guitar, and obviously there's no set rules for this, but a really good rule of thumb, I think, is you have one microphone pointing at the 12th fret of your fretboard, and one pointing over here at the neck. Okay. So you have a stereo setup with a set of stereo mics, ideally. So a set of paired mics, if you know what that means. You don't want to use two different mics. You really want to use two mics that were made in the same, that basically have consecutive serial numbers, right? So for example, this mic here, which is an NT5, sorry, that I'm using for my live streaming here, has a paired twin. And those I use for my stereo recordings. It's not the best mic, but it's fine, you know, for stuff like guitar recordings, or if I'm recording cello, or percussion even sometimes, although less frequently now. It's mostly for my live guitar work, I think. For everything that's supposed to sound realistic, that's probably what I would use. I think it's a really good sound, because you have the clean sound of the swishing of the changing frets from the left hand, because you have the mic up there, and you have the other one that has a lot more body, right, pointing at the 12th fret. So that, I think, is a much better setup for that. The room acoustics aren't going to be as noticeable, obviously, as if the microphone is outside. It's just something you have to figure out, you know. I would say try it out. You could. I'm sure it's going to be less noticeable if you use an built-in mic. It's probably less noticeable. And I have one guitar that has a built-in mic, which I don't have here right now. But I just never used the built-in mic. I just never thought it really sounded any good. And it just felt overloaded. It's just not the best microphone either. Maybe it's just, I mean, maybe you have a really fantastic guitar. If you have a very expensive guitar with a really great built-in mic, you know, that might be very useful. Yeah, it just depends on your mic as well, and you know how it's placed, and you know it's hard to say, of course. But if it's a fairly cheap guitar, I would say go for outside microphone techniques. It's just usually outside miking techniques. It's usually better, because just you have more control over the signal too. Another question from Nico: when peak sweeping through an audio recording in a graphically cue to find bad resonances, what is it exactly you have to listen for? It sounds all bad to me if you increase the volume enough. And Ater says, yeah, that's completely true. Every single frequency sounds offensive and irritating in isolation. That's why I use plugins like Sonable Smart EQ and Isotope Nectar 3. They know better than me where the holes and buildups that need compensation are. So what you're listening for is essentially resonances, and then you decide whether you like those resonances or not. So one really important thing about that is you leave the EQ off and you first listen if there's any resonances that you don't like. If there's anything that really stands out, like for example, like there's like a certain hum at a certain frequency, then you use the frequency sweep to find that frequency so you can pull it down a little bit. And I'm not saying like pull it down by 12 decibel, but a very, very gently and a very small broadband, right? You want to notch that out. You don't want to have like this huge bell curve. You really want to just notch that one frequency out, and just a little bit. You don't want to take it out too much. And what's really important, because as you said, like if you sweep through and you don't know what you're looking for, everything is going to sound bad. That's not the right thing to do. You really have to listen first. Keep the equalizer bypassed. Listen first where the things are that are bothering you or that you think are interesting, and then find them using the sweeping, and then pull them down if they're really bothering you. And what's really useful for that is as well to bypass that that frequency band that you just pulled down, to see if really the sound is changing. And again, you have to listen to this. This is the most important thing. If you're not listening, you're not learning, you're not improving your hearing, and you're not becoming a better producer. So I know producers who say you shouldn't frequency sweep at all. You shouldn't just be able to hear what the frequency is. And I have producer friends who can just say like about 440 hertz, and they'll pull it down and be like, okay, now it was a little bit too low. Let's try that again. It should probably be 460 hertz. And they'll try that, and they're like, okay, that's it. So they have trained their ears in such a way that they don't even need frequency sweeping anymore. And that's not necessary, but I think it's really great because it really forces you to listen to your ears. And that's sort of the next step. Like, it's something to certainly test. I know some books have written about it as well, but there's professionals who don't do that. Like I know, for example, what's his name? Andy Wallace, for example, doesn't do that. Like he's essentially a sweeper. So, and a lot of producers are sweepers. So it's not necessarily something you have to do, but I think it's a good step to take in order to train your ears and to be able to discern a little bit better where those frequencies are that stand out, and whether you want to boost those or take them out. Okay? So again, bypass a lot. Like when you boosted something or when you took something out, bypass a lot and be like, okay, is this now soft enough? Is this good? Or do I have to take out a little bit more? Also, if you have really strong resonances, remember that based on physics, you're not going to have that resonance on just one frequency typically, but you're going to have it on all the higher, the overtones of that are also going to be resonant. So if you have a overtone if you have a resonance at 100 hertz, you're also going to get that resonance at 200, 300, 400, 500 hertz, etc. Okay, so that's something to consider as well. All right. Next question is by Felipe, who says, I guess not, unless you are inside a really the worst word ever, especially for a German. I guess not, unless you are inside a really reverberating room. Reverberating room. That is a great band name. But even in that case, I don't think it would have an effect. If you have some demos like... Okay, so he was answering some questions. I would like to... he said about the demo thing. So if you have some demos like not the real thing yet, would you suggest to release them publicly? Just not in a campaign yet, just make them public? Oh, or just save it until you have the final product? This is a really interesting question. And there's two schools of thought to this. The one school says release everything immediately and overshare basically everything with your fans, right? You want your everyone to be involved in your process. And the other is you want to surprise them with the final thing, and you'd want them to be like wowed by the final thing. And if they've already heard all the steps in between, it's not going to be as much of a surprise as if they, if it just came out and they're hearing it for the first time. So there's truth to both, I think. The new media, with internet, Patreon and everything, the first approach seems to get more and more, but I feel like it's also plateaued to a certain degree. We had that much more at the beginning of the internet when people really started oversharing their design process. And it's kind of come to a halt a little bit, I think. The other approach seems to hold ground much more. I still think it's much stronger if you just hit people with your stuff, especially your fans. If you can build the excitement for the final thing more and more and more, people will go really bonkers and just go crazy once the album come out and buy it. If you have some really big fans, they're still going to buy your records or your merch or whatever it might be, or come to your gig. So that shock factor I still think is really strong. Both have their arguments for them. Personally, I think the second variant is better. So what I'm planning for my personal album is I'm gonna release the album with a bunch of behind the scenes stuff, so that you basically get all that process, but you just get it once it's released, because I don't want you to hear the stuff before it's fully done, basically. Or if I show you something, then it's typically just a really small part of it, and you don't really get a sense of what the whole thing is going to sound like yet. So I did a live stream last week, which is kind of goes against that, because I showed quite a bit of the song already. But I think that was intentional, because I thought, you know what, no one's heard anything of me yet in that genre. So I kind of want to put out a little bit of that, so people have an idea of what's coming, so people will get more excited for the actual thing when it hits. So you have to balance that out a little bit. You can't just not give them anything and expect them to like your pages and to follow you around, because that's not going to work either. So you have to feed them with little bits here and there anyways, and whether that's behind the scenes stuff, or just showing them how to play one riff, or talking about things, or talking about your sound, or talking about your lyrics, releasing some stuff, smaller things, just not the whole thing. To get them excited, that I think is probably the best approach. I think that's a fine balance between those two extremes. Good. So I would say wait till the final product, but release small bits and pieces to get people excited for your stuff. Another aspect to this that I personally find really interesting is, when do you start showing people your stuff? And by that I don't even mean your fans, but I mean your friends and family. Now, I used to be very open with my design process, I'm calling it design process, but the creative process of my music making. And I feel like that has kind of backfired, and I don't like to do that so much anymore. Now, it was very useful while I was still a film composer, because I would get so much feedback that it would be easier to adapt my songwriting or my composition mid-process if someone gave me feedback early on and said, like, hey, you know what, this piece here was great, but this here, I don't know what you're thinking of. Like, that's just, the emotion here is just completely wrong. Can we just do something completely different here? That's easier, obviously, if the composition isn't that far yet. Whereas if I'm the artist, if I'm making the decisions, I find it better to just hold out as long as you can before you show anyone. And that song you heard on the live stream, you guys were the first people to ever hear this song. Like, my wife hasn't heard it. Like, I showed a couple of the songs now to her a couple of days ago, and she really liked them. But I waited for about 3 months before she heard the first note the first ever thing that I wrote. So first everything. What I'm saying is, like, for 3 months I've been writing in secrecy, so to say, like with the closed door, and saying, like, hey, I want this to be private. I just want to work on this. I want to really sink into the stuff, into the matter, and I really want to focus on this. I have to do this by myself. I don't want anyone's opinion on this. I just want to work on this myself. I need to figure this out for myself. So please don't come in. It's going to be my only focus, and this is all I'm going to worry about for the next couple of months. And I find that works so much better. First of all, I really feel like I've grown as a songwriter. I've managed to solve a lot of problems that I knew the songs had. I just didn't know how. And I feel like a cop-out is calling someone else in and saying, like, hey, what do you think? I know this is a little bit tricky. Do you have any ideas? Because you're basically putting the pressure on them. And typically they won't have a good answer for it either. So you have to really figure out how to do these things yourself, I think. It's going to make you a better writer, and you're going to be in control of it ultimately. And again, it's a cop-out, just asking someone else. I think a lot of the times we show songs to other songwriters because we want them to finish our songs. And when they don't do that, we kind of feel discouraged. And that's not a good thing. Okay. That's pretty much all I want to say about that, I think. No question just popped in from Atar. Hey, Friedemann. Would you ever use clusters, quartals, upper structures, and other crazy stuff in a pop song? Thoughts on that? I have used clusters in pop songs before. Quartals, so quarter tones, no. That's very challenging to do, I think, for a pop song. I guess it would be possible if you added like a little bit of an oriental vibe into it. Like, what's that song? Justin Timberlake did a song called "Don't Hold the Wall," I think, which I think has some quarter tones in there somewhere, and I think works really well. So if you play with some Eastern European vibes in your song, I think that can really work. Clusters, I think, can work really well as well. We did some backing vocals in clusters, so really just diatonic cluster. So it wasn't halftones or anything like that, but it was every single note had a, so we did one note melodies on every single note in the scale basically. And I think it sounded really cool. Upper structures, absolutely. I'm a big fan of upper structures in melodies especially. So I'll use the melodies to imply my upper structures typically. And sometimes in chords as well. For my rock stuff especially, I use a lot of upper structures. For pop, R&B, upper structures are really fantastic and really great, I think, to add a lot of color to your stuff. So other crazy stuff that I've done, I mean, I've done for my pop stuff, I've used some weird chords, I guess, but nothing too out of the ordinary. Like when I was in major, for one song, I used a 4 minor. You know, small things like that. Trying to think of some other outlandish things that I've done in my pop music. I've used some more complicated jazzy Latin kind of runs in some of my songs. Like they were more chromatic than everything else, but more in the background. So it's all subtle stuff, kind of. Sometimes having the bass note in the wrong place, essentially, so not following the chords, but like doing its own thing. That can be quite cool, can add a lot of color. But those things are really tricky to pull off, especially if you want to be commercial. All that is really getting very challenging to do. If you're interested in that, you know, having the bass play something else, I'd suggest you go look at Katy Perry's I Kissed a Girl, which in the chorus has the bass playing a pedal, essentially, which I think is really cool. And when it resolves that pedal onto the chords, I think it's really cool. It's a very cool moment. So I'm not saying it's impossible. And there's the other song that I would say is really one of the most experimental pop songs I've heard is The Riddle by, it's called The Riddle, right? The Riddle by, it's like some Italian dude, right? Codaline? No. Gigi D'Agostino, The Riddle. Has some really weird chords and really weird key changes and super strange, but because the key changes happen in between sections, not during a section, and the sections themselves are so memorable and so good, so well written, it works, you know. So I think it's totally possible to do crazy stuff, but you don't want to do it during a section. You want to do it in between sections, like transitioning from one 4-bar or 8-bar or 16-bar section to another. Like what you do here, as long as what both sections are great, what you do in the middle is not so important. You know, you can't even do time changes, tempo changes. It gets a little bit trickier there because it's not as danceable anymore, because people want to have one clear groove that they can dance to. And if that changes, everyone on the dance floor is going to be like, what's going on? And then like have to like rethink the whole timing. And if you do that multiple times in a song, people are going to be really pissed. So for commercial music, not necessarily something I would recommend to change the time signature or the tempo. But you could change keys or something like that. You could have melodies coming from different scales. I've done that before in the past. That is really fun to do. So for example, what's that song? Safe from Harm by Massive Attack has that melody that really sounds as if it was taken from a different key. And maybe it was, you know, maybe it was sampled to another groove or to another key. It really sounds as if it's like as if it was recorded to a piece of music that was originally a fifth lower or higher or something like that, you know. That's kind of what it sounds like. It sounds like some of the notes just sit a little bit wrong, and it just kind of creates that interesting tension in that song. It's not one of my favorite songs, I must say, for that very reason, because I'm hearing the melody just kind of over different chords, but it's certainly an interesting tension, and I think a lot of people really liked it, and it's one of their most famous songs. So that's something I would listen to as well. So yeah, generally, I talk about this in the Hook and Melody Master Files as well. There's an update that I did for that, and if you have the Hook and Melody Master Files, go check out the course, because I think it's one of my most interesting updates for that course, and more updates are going to follow on this course, by the way, because it shows you how to write jazzy melodies, and this is kind of what I'm talking about in the course. Just to what I was just talking about with Massive Attack is a little bit more complicated and also simpler, because they're not thinking about it as hard, so that's what's simpler about it. But music theory, in terms of music theory, if you actually analyzed it, it would actually be a little bit more complicated. But basically what they just did is they recorded it to one piece of music and then played music in another key to it. You know, that's the process behind it is actually fairly simple. something that I should talk about in an update, actually, because it's a really interesting way to write melodies. I should also talk about implied harmony and those kind of things. This is something I haven't actually talked about anywhere, I think. Have I talked about... I've talked a little bit about it in the Radiohead episode on the artist series. That is quite an interesting subject. I think implied harmony is definitely really cool, but maybe not so much for pop music. Anyways, those were the questions. Some very interesting questions today. I really like the last question, Aitor. Really, really nice question from you. Thank you so much. So let's move on to the songs. And we have quite a couple today. We have a bunch of people on the chat as well. Jordan is online. That's really nice. Yeah, that makes me feel so much better. So Jordan, I'm presuming about that demo comment says, that makes me feel so much better about all the time I spend trying to get what I want, learning the language, if that makes any sense. Yes, I really think it's important to do that, because a lot of the times we have these challenges while we're producing a song. And it's not that those are going to go away if you send it to someone else. They're going to struggle with that as well. If you can solve that problem for them, if you basically can solve all of the problems that the song has for the producer, then they can just really focus on making your song fucking fantastic. And I know this from personal experience. You know, if I ever sent a song to someone that's just not, I know there's some issues with it, they're struggling with that just as much as I am, you know, and they have to figure out how to do it. And that's just where all their time goes before they can actually work on the actual song. And it's coming out of your budget and your time, man. So, you know, you need to be aware of that. Okay, he says, I'm really encouraged to hear that that's a good move. Great. Awesome, man. Really happy to hear that. Signing up for the course. I'm not sure which one you're talking about, but awesome. I'm always happy to hear people are looking at my courses. Thanks, man. Because one of the main reasons I do my courses is because I get asked the same questions all the time. And so, like, if I hear a question 3 times in a row, I'm just like, I get this nagging little man in the back of my head who says stuff like, you could make a course out of this, you know, and you would never have to answer this question again. So that's kind of what I'm doing, making the courses for, really. Felipe says, thanks, man. I'm doing it mostly with friends, not taking the next step yet. Jordan says, I totally feel you on the secret writing portion. No judgment until they don't have to hear through the mud, which is 98% of people aren't able to do. So true. 98% of people is fairly accurate, I would say. And that includes musicians. Musicians can't hear through mud either. It's ridiculous. I really try. I really give it my best to be able to listen through production. And I think I'm fairly good at it. It's something I've definitely trained myself to do over the years. But it is still very challenging. And there are some pieces of music where I'm thinking, like, you know, throw a really, really good producer behind this who really gets the best take out of that person, who really manages to line all the beats up and everything. And this could be something. But it's challenging to think in that way. Because, well, are you doing the person any favors? If I'm giving feedback to your song and it's just the recording is horrible, right? The timing is all wonky. The pitch is all over the place. The writing is just... Maybe the writing is good. Maybe the writing is fantastic, right? Do I say like, hey, great song, keep going? I mean, I should talk about the production, right? If that's the biggest issue. Even if there's some problems with the writing, shouldn't I first talk about the recording and the production? Because I feel like that's still the biggest issue that person has. And you have to solve that, because that's where most people are held up if they're listening to your song. That's the big issue that you have. So that's why I sometimes focus too much on production. A lot of you have been talking about this, and some of you have been complaining about this, that I always talk about production, how important it is, and people want more advice on their songwriting. Well, I understand that. I really understand that, because you want to be a songwriter, but you also have to understand that if you want to be a songwriter, there is this big, big hurdle that people are going to have listening to your songs. And if you don't get that handled, people won't even get to that part. You can be the best songwriter in the world. If your productions suck, that's really going to hold you up. It's a big fucking barrier, man. So get that handled. Beatmaster says it should add to the lyrics, I guess. Which question was this about again? Jordan says, I absolutely love doing it too. I just didn't want to step on their toes, you know? I can't stop, which is why I've spent so much time. So I have no idea what you're referring to here, unfortunately. So I'm just glad we're agreeing on something. All right, let's see what songs we're going to look at today. I think we're going to look at the ones from December 14th first, which were for last Saturday. So here we have 3 songs? Was it just 3 songs? We had more songs than that, didn't we? Let me check that again, because I'm fairly certain that we had more than 3 songs. We had a bunch of songs last week. So, there we go. Yeah, because we had mistakenly had put up 2 posts about the songs for Saturday the 15th. Okay, so we do have quite a couple of songs to listen to. Okay, Grayson Earhart has a cover because he doesn't have anything original that's shareable yet. It's very incomplete, but I would still love to hear any feedback you may have since it's in such a mutable state. What does mutable mean in that regard? Mutable state? Oh, to be. Oh, yeah, gotcha. Okay, so it was like because you mute it, so it's like easy to mute, but no, it's obviously comes from mutant. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, where did it go? There we go. So Grayson, typically we don't want to do covers here because we don't have the rights to them. I'm gonna let this one slide, but in the future, please only original stuff. Okay, just as a side note, because I don't want to get into trouble of having to take songs down or something like that. And actually, you know what? Maybe we should be careful with this, because this is going to be a longer episode of 2 hours. And what I really don't want to happen is for this video to be taken down, so that the people who also have submitted songs can't listen to their feedback. That would really suck. So maybe I'm going to do another video after this that's particularly just about your cover. So that if that video gets taken down, it's just that one song, okay? But right now, I think it probably would be a bad idea because we're already like 40 minutes in. I think it's a little dangerous because I've had that happen before. Like sometimes artists claiming, the rights to certain songs, and then the video is blocked for everyone, and that really sucks. Okay, Kyle has a song, Epitaph. After hearing my feedback, I'll be on the right track now. Okay, cool. I'm looking forward to hearing Kyle's new version of that song. So let's check it out by Hidden Gentleman. I'm always excited to hear more stuff from you guys. So here we go.
These are my memories. This is my regret. This could be my epitaph. Nothing to forget. This is how we live. Give it all away. This is how we live. Give it all away. If I had my life, I would do it all again. I would do it all again. If I find looking back, I have no regret. I could not live again, ever forget. This is how we live. Give it all away. If I had my life, I would do it all again. If I had my life, I would do it all again. There are ghosts in the machine. The voice of never too late. Never too late. This is how we live. Give it all away. If I had my life, I would
Cool, man. I mean, it still has all the good things that I liked about it last time. It still has some of the bad stuff in there, unfortunately, and we're going to get to that. But first of all, what I want to talk about here is something that I think a lot of you folks can learn from, which is what I really like about the productions that Kyle is doing here. I think you're producing this yourself, as far as I know. What I really like about your productions is how dry they are. Not saying you can't use reverb, but I think it shows, you can really hear the details in all the instruments because nothing is washed out by reverb. First of all, I think it makes the songs a lot groovier because the dryness, it lets you really hear all the transients really well. Everything is very clearly defined, and it makes it a little bit more, it makes the mixing process easier because this still feels like a demo because of that, I think. Like, it doesn't feel polished because there's no reverb on it, and I think you could add a little bit of reverb here and there. It could stay fairly dry, I think, though. I think that sound fits you guys really, really well, and I like it a lot. Maybe not even reverb, but some like short halls, short rooms, or delays instead of actual reverb, I think would work really well with you guys. Just adding a little bit of in there now. But the thing is, if you have a dry mix, first of all, it's really great to preview a song like that. The mixing is actually made a whole lot easier by it because, again, the tails of the reverbs aren't drowning everything out. You can really hear everything clearly and balance everything out perfectly, and pan everything perfectly before you add all that stuff. So I think it's a really smart move to start when you're starting with mixing, to just leave out all the reverb and make sure that it sounds great, and then you can start adding that stuff, you know? Because it is an effect, it's an enhancing effect, and it's not there to shape your entire songwriting. That's not the idea behind it. And that's what I'm doing with my rock songs as well. Like, I'm not using any reverb on anything. That will happen eventually, but I'm trying to keep my songs as dry as possible because I think often that's where the punch is. That's often where the grooviness is. That's often where a lot of the things are that we really like. And if we add reverb, that often can get kind of a little blurred, you know? So that is, I think, a really positive note on all of your productions. I think they're just, it's really great because the songs are so clearly laid out, and since you have some really great performances, you have some really great melodies, you have some really terrific writing happening here and in all of your songs. So I think it's really nice because we can just really listen to the songs. And still, this is at a demo level, but I think it's clearly laid out, you know. I still think, you know, there's definitely, you have some headroom here, that's for sure, with all of your songs. But for a demo, I think this is great because we can really hear the band and you guys playing together. I think that's really important here. And I think that should be preserved through whichever stages you take the song, through with whichever production process you want. My issue lies still with the pre-chorus. I think the pre-chorus still is not building enough tension. I think the chorus is better. I think the chorus has more hype now than it used to have. So it's more clearly a chorus, or it's very clearly a chorus now. I still think the melodies are all really nice. Also, I like the pre-chorus quite a bit. I still think it's maybe not for this song. Maybe this should be a... should we listen to that? What could that be?
Nothing to forget. Give it all away. This is how we live. Give it all away. If I had
I think you need to be building a lot more through that. I think this can work if you just build a little bit more with your drums, because I think you're just having like the backbeat essentially. I think you have some bass drums in there as well, but it's fairly sparse, and that's what the song is, and that's, I think, really great that the song is so sparse. I think in this section though, you could add a little bit more, so that first of all you contrast that with the rest of the sparseness of the song, and also to just build up the tension here. I think that would work really well here actually. So if you added in a couple more,
this is how we live. Give it all
it's tricky. It is tricky because it falls relatively flat. Da, 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 da. It's still, even though the rhythm is so off, it's not really building a lot of tension rhythmically yet. It's tricky. This is a tricky example. So personally, I would try it without. and then see if there's another way you can handle this just on the drums. Maybe you can, I think it's probably a combination of both guitar and drums. You probably have to build with both to get that pre-chorus effect. Because right now it still feels like it takes the energy of the song out, and it feels like, what's going on? And then, oh yeah, there's the chorus, and then we're back into it. So I still really think the pre-chorus is the weak point of the song. Everything else I really like. So if you work on that a little bit more, the leveling of the voices is a little bit off. The chorus is definitely too loud, or the rest is too soft. I forgot exactly, but like there's definitely a big jump in volume there. I really like the new harmonies that you guys wrote. Some really good stuff there. The chorus does feel occasionally a little bit repetitive, a little bit empty. Like if you changed the cool bass sound, by the way. If I had a dream, I would do, like if you had another voice overlapping that, maybe not in the first chorus, but maybe starting with the second chorus, adding a little bit more excitement there. If that part just feels a little bit too empty, but I mean it's good. Maybe that's the alternative bit. Maybe that's what makes you guys interesting, because you have such stripped out arrangements. Maybe that's exactly what makes you guys special. So I can't really say for sure. I'm really torn between this. I would probably try out both and see which one works better for you guys. And what you do live is another question, of course. I also think this one here feels a little weak. If you just had a bass going just like, and then you can have silence for a little while. But just having, I think that one should be a little bit more pronounced, should have a little bit more bottom to it, so that it doesn't feel so super empty. Because right now the second verse starts off very, very sparse, and I think just adding a little bit of bass in there or something, or a kick drum on the one, I feel it needs a little bit more there. But again, I think a really great song, and again, a really great example for all you producers out there to just start very simple, have a very simple mix, and worry about balancing and EQing, and maybe a little bit of compression. But I think this is a really, really nice example of like what a first mix really should sound like. So very good example here. Okay, let's move on to another song by Conrad. He made a new track called Immortality. So let's check that out. By Dr. Code.
Sometimes my waking life just feels like a bore. Each new occasion like I've seen it before. Life is a grind that grinds you down to your core. But each disappointment makes you thirst for it more. I'm over in my mind. I hope that I can find, but little can I know. Don't wanna let it go. Why can't I be just fine?
Nice vocal sound there. That's definitely a big improvement over what I heard last from you. There's some really good bits in here, actually. It's fun because it really has that 80s sound, and also with the drums, you know, that kind of thing, which is funny to hear, and is really cool because it sounds unique, you know, it sounds niche, and that's something I always like. I think the vocal performance is definitely a lot better than what I heard last time. It's definitely a lot more engaging. There's a lot more, you're exploring a lot more pitches. It's more energetic. So I think there's a lot of improvement there. I still think that the vocals, the timing and the pitch of the vocals are often, like, there's definitely room for improvement. And that's just going to take a couple more takes and comping together a perfect take, basically, which I show how to do on the Geek Free Music Production course, if you're interested in that kind of thing. So it's a little more work to really get the vocals just right. The timing is just, sometimes it's really hard to tell. And that's what I was talking about earlier with the demo stage thing, is sometimes it's just really hard to tell, is it this rhythm or is it that rhythm? So sometimes it's really difficult because the note is kind of placed in between the two, or it feels like it should be this rhythm, but it's like, it's a little dragged out. So it starts off on the beat and then it's like behind the beat, or it's before the beat. So it's kind of hard to tell sometimes what exactly I'm hearing. And that's also what I mean by the production is a barrier between me and the song, is that sometimes it's really difficult to just be able to tell what the song actually is, because the timing and the pitch sometimes don't really tell me enough about what the melody is actually supposed to be. So the another thing about the production is it feels still like the synthesizers are center stage and your vocals are kind of secondary order, you know, they're not front and center still. And so I would like to hear a little bit less of the synths here. That's where they are right now. I would like to hear the synths a little bit more there. So you could probably use a chorus to achieve that effect. A very slight chorus, just enough to kind of move it away from the center so that the vocals can come forward a little bit and be in that center. Feel that, you know, be right up close. And I think that's also going to take care of another problem, which is that the drums still don't have any impact. I think if you, first of all, you can bring them up in volume a little bit so that the kick drum has a little bit more oomph. And also it will sound closer if it doesn't have to share those low frequencies in the center of the stereo panorama with those synthesizers. Okay. Songwriting wise, it's a little all over the place, and I think the biggest culprit is probably the drum set. The drums just kind of are not really telling a story. It feels like they're starting an idea and then they kind of get lost in that, and then they start something else, but on a weird moment. So the drum track is a little all over the place. If you found someone that maybe you have a drummer in your someone that you know that could take a look at this and kind of program a drum track that makes a little bit more sense. Because the drum tracks themselves make sense. It's just when they start, when they change stuff, that could be better, I think. And how they change it, I mean, there's some things that could definitely be improved about that drum track. I think if you change that, the lyrical storytelling of this would be a lot more clearer. Which brings me to my next point, which is the structure of it. I think is a little iffy at points. When the chorus comes and when you transition to the verse, how you transition to the verses. Every once in a while, I'm thinking like, I mean, this just could be stronger. Even if you want to write something that isn't like super commercial right now, I mean, still the 80s had a lot of that already, you know. So you don't have to like follow it to a T, but the addiction formula, I still think. Would certainly help to streamline the whole thing a little bit more. So right now it's 3:57 and it felt more like 5 minutes, you know, and that's not a good thing. I think you could probably, that doesn't mean you have to make it shorter, even though I think maybe you could. I think 3 minutes, maybe 3:20 or so would probably be enough for this. So half a minute you can easily shave off, I'm sure, possibly even more. But if you structure this differently, it's going to feel more like 2.5 minutes. And that's kind of what you want. You know, you always want a song to feel shorter than it actually is. Or in some cases, you actually want it to feel longer than it actually is. There's some songs that are, like when I'm writing an energetic song, for example, like I will write my energetic songs, the more energetic it's supposed to be, the more stuff happens, the shorter I will keep it. So I just wrote a song that's like 2 minutes 30 and it feels like 4 minutes. Like if you looked at the time of that, you'd be like, wow, crazy. It's really that short? Yes, because there's so much happening that it feels like a lot, as you've heard a lot of song, basically. So the melodies here and there feel like they're driven too much by the lyrics as well. Like there are some motifs in here, but it feels like the struggle of lyrics versus music versus melody, the lyrics are usually winning. And I would say tilt it a little bit more towards the music now and maybe write some, as a challenge to you, I would say the next song you write some BS lyrics. Lyrics that just make absolutely no sense, but use the words that sound best with the melody. And the only two things I want you to worry about with the lyrics is, one, make sure they fit rhythmically. And so that the stresses line up properly and that there's no extra syllables that kind of like make the melody longer or shorter than they actually should be. And B, make sure the vowels are in the right place and that you're using the right vowels. Because every once in a while here, I forgot exactly what the word was, but maybe it was sky or something like that. And the vowel just didn't work for me at all. Like, there's a couple of moments, like especially when you're holding out longer notes, I always experiment with that a lot. Like I'm trying to figure out like what's the best vowel I could use here. And that will determine what kind of lyrics I'll write for it, you know? And if I can't find a good word with that vowel, well, then I have to keep experimenting. And oftentimes I'll wrap my lyrics around that vowel to make sure that that works somehow. And I'll find some ways to incorporate that. And maybe that's just the writer I am, that's just my style, but I think it makes your music just a lot more commercial if you can write like that. And this is not just a thing of the past 30 years. This is really a thing that was true throughout all of pop music. Is that the melody is the driver of the car. You know, it's not the lyrics. The lyrics are kind of it's the what do you call it? The carrosserie. What do you call that in English? It's a funny word in German. Carrosserie. Say that. I would love to hear what Americans saying that word sound like. It's the car body, the vehicle body, shell, I guess. All right, the body. Yeah, so, but the important thing, the motor is really the melody, and that's what it should be, because that's what people really listen to, and that's where they get their emotion from. The lyrics are kind of on top of that. If the emotion transfers, like if I get the emotion of the melody, then I'll start listening to the lyrics, and it's going to transport me to a specific situation. That's what the lyrics are good for, I think. They make me, they wake up my mind and my memories and all that kind of stuff. But the melodies are good for the emotion. If we don't have the emotion, it's really tough to get here, you know? So the right way to someone's affection, I think, goes through the heart and not through the brain. So it's the correct approach is this way and not this way, if that makes any sense. So I think as a challenge for you, and what's funny is I think when you do that, again, my challenge is write melodies from, like for the next song, I want you to just focus on the melodies and write BS lyrics. Just don't care about what the lyrics actually say and say like, you know what, this is for later. Now I'm just going to focus on the melody. And what I think is going to happen if you do that enough, like if you do that for the next 2 or 3 or maybe 100 songs, what you're going to realize is that words start to form and shape that do make sense. And all of a sudden you have a line that you never would have thought of otherwise, just because it was the first thing that erupted from your lips, and it's just the first thing that your subconscious came up with. You're like, wow, that's actually a really good line. I wonder what that means. Let's build a framework for that so that it works within the song. And that's often how I work, and I find that a really interesting approach to writing songs. Sometimes it's difficult because sometimes you have a couple of lines that sound amazing, but you have no idea what they mean, and you have no idea how to make them into something that could mean anything. And that can be quite challenging. I have 2 songs on the rock album right now that I'm still struggling with because of that very reason. But for the rest of the songs, and that's right now 7 other songs, it was no problem at all. I immediately had something that worked with that. So the majority of the time, you will find something that actually does make sense. So that's my challenge to you. I think there's big progress here for sure. I would say use a little bit more chorus for these really hard synthesizers. You'll soften them a little bit and make them a little bit more stereo, a little bit spread them a little bit. They're gonna move into the background a little bit so that the vocals can be right up front and we can actually properly listen to the vocals. Another sound, I really like what you're doing with the vocals, by the way, with the effects. I think that's all really nice. You have the clean sound, you have the slightly distorted through the amp sound, I think, which is just the perfect amount of distortion for me. I really like that. I like the flanger thing that you're doing. That's nice. I think another sound that you could try out would be a slight delay. So no reverb, just completely dry, just a tiny little bit of delay, which is probably going to be like 120 milliseconds or something like that, or maybe less even. So it's something to experiment with that you softly mix in there. It's the Elvis sound, so having a little bit of a slap back. Just don't make it too loud, because it shouldn't ever be as loud as the main melody. It should definitely be behind it, but it gives you that feeling of like yelling through a megaphone or something like that. So that's another sound I could definitely see going with this kind of style. All right, so that's Immortality for you folks. I think a really good effort. I think a really good step in the right direction. Okay, so that was Conrad. So that's leaves us just with Grayson's song, which we're going to cover in another video. Let's look at the post from December 9th. Next, we have a song by Philip Coate, right? We listened to the first one last time. I think it was called Venus, and that was the longer song, and I really loved it. He's the guy who did Ocean Blue. No, what was it called? Something like that before, which was just absolutely fantastic. You guys have to hear it. It's just a really great song. I'm really looking forward when that album comes out. Philip, I'm really hoping you're going to record that with a really fantastic producer and turn that into something fantastic. I mean, it's going to be niche, but I think people in that niche, like me, are really going to love what you're doing, because I think you have so much talent. I think you really need to turn that into something. Spend what you can afford, obviously, but really put enough money into this to make it really sound fucking fantastic. Really, please do that. All right, let's listen to London Dreaming from you, and I hope it's as good as the other ones. A lot of pressure there.
I'm leaving all my feelings in a bag outside.
By the way, sorry, your name escapes me, but the person we just reviewed, this is kind of the sound that I was talking about. It has that sort of slap back delay on it. This also has a little bit of reverb on it, but you can't just do it completely dry. It doesn't have to have it doesn't have to have that reverb on it. It can be completely dry, but this here has just a tiny bit of that slap back, and I think it's a really nice sound. I think that would go well with your sound as well.
I have to find a meaning, for the sun shall return inside. This animal is waiting for his one to come back. But the only thing I came into this lost in was a sense from a life he once had. I forgot about my luggage, and I forgot about my food. And I wonder why I feel so cold. London
to me and said she didn't love me on a day, yes, a day such as this. I forgot about my luggage, and I forgot about my phone, and I wonder why I feel so cold. London dreaming, London bleeding out. I'll be back before you know. London dreaming, London bleeding out. I'm not waiting anymore. No, 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 London dreaming, London bleeding out. I'll be back before you know. London dreaming, London bleeding out. I'm not waiting anymore. London dreaming, London bleeding out. I'll be back before you know. I'm not waiting anymore. I'm not waiting anymore.
Again and again and again, man. You did it again. Super cool, dude. Man, you're the master of chords. Hands down, dude. It's amazing what you do with harmony. Really, it's very, very, very fun to hear how you're working with that. It's just so, so cool. So, yes, it is a little bit musician's music, but I think it doesn't cross the line. You know, it's definitely not non-commercial because of that. I mean, it's not radio material, I think. In the 90s or early 2000s, this would have still probably flown under the radar just yet, but I think now it's probably a little bit too complicated. But man, I mean, you know, this is like Radiohead or those kind of bands, or Oasis. This would have fit right in with those kind of bands, I'm sure, in terms of complexity. But I think you're going a couple of steps further without actually crossing the line. I still think this is very. I'm not going to call it easy listening because that's such a negative term, but you know what I mean. Like it's definitely consumable. It's not something I'd have to like properly put on and just have to listen from start to finish to actually get what I'm hearing. Like it's not something I have to analyze in order to get it. It's something I can just listen to and just have it on in the background to still get the emotion. So that's great. I think you're doing all those things really, really well. Again, the production is still the thing that holds it back a little bit. It just doesn't have the impact. The drums I found were a little hectic, a little busy, especially the bass drum. The kick drum was just doing too much, and I like a really cleaned up kick drum, especially. That's typically the biggest culprit for drum programming, especially in the beginning here. Listen to that kick drum there. How many of those hits he's using? I think it's too much. So also he's switching from a rim stick to a full on snare. It's a doom do click, doom do ksh, which is cool. It's unusual. I think I probably would have preferred just one or the other. I mean it's cool because it's experimental. So maybe you can leave it in because that's your style, and I kind of like that you're doing stuff like that. It's not something I would do, just because I like the sound of. To me, they mean two very different things. The click sound is, I want that for a very intimate kind of sound, and the full snare is for like a big sound. So to me, it just means this is kind of happening, and I don't like that. For me, it's weird. But then again, I appreciate that you are doing it because it's just personally wouldn't do it, that doesn't mean I don't think it's good. You know, there's plenty of songs out there that I would never write that way, but I still think they're amazing, you know, and this is one of those songs. So a lot of what you're doing, I would never do or wouldn't be able to do probably. But I really appreciate what you're doing. A lot of it is just very cool and very interesting, and but still weirdly enough works. You know, if I were to do something like this with a lot of the things that you're doing, I think it probably wouldn't work. I think you're really good at finding just the right sweet spot between too much and just enough, you know. So, yeah, the bass drum there is just a little too busy. I think if it was just hitting the most important notes, I think it would be less hectic, because that beginning is supposed to feel a little bit relaxed, I think. And it's already kind of doing a lot there, which I think you could strip that out a little bit. Then it's also building fairly quickly. Like that first section feels like, okay, this is the energy, that level that we can expect out of this. And then it builds and it builds and it gets huge at the end. And so that whole story arc, while it works, again, and this makes me wonder if it's maybe the production. Maybe it's just, it seems so big just because the production isn't stripped out enough yet. It seems like all of the sounds are so overwhelming. There's so much going on sonically that if you were to like really make sure that only the most important frequencies of all these instruments are in the mix and everything else is stripped out so that the mix sounds a little bit cleaner, I think it probably would work a lot better as in terms of the building, but I'm not quite sure. That's something I would have to hear. So that requires a better production, unfortunately. So I feel like, again, that's kind of holding back your song. It feels like as soon as the guitars come in your first chorus, it's just full on energy because they sound so noisy. And I'm not saying the mix is bad, because it's fine. For a demo, it's fine. And it's better than a lot of the other stuff that we've heard. Not today necessarily, but in general, like on people send me. Like, it's a fairly good mix, and I think it definitely gets the emotion across. But it's just, once those guitars kick in, it feels like there's a lot of noise and a lot of high energy, and it's just, that never comes back down because the guitars are so, and all the instruments really are so tense, so dense, sonically, harmonically, overtone-wise, that it just, the energy curve of it doesn't really do this enough. It feels more like it's kind of doing this, you know what I mean? Okay, other than that, fantastic song. Again, I'm your biggest fan, man. Keep doing what you're doing, and I'm looking forward to the album, which you please have to send to me. I hope you're going to do a physical print of this, and yeah, I really hope it's going to find its audience. So I'm excited about this stuff. Really nice melodies. You're just really great at that. Like, everything makes sense harmonically. This is completely checked out. I can hear that you know what you're doing. Fantastic. Really, really, really like this. All right. Alvaro has a song. Did not produce the song, but I did the vocal production. It's a teaser, and he did the 40 seconds challenge. Okay, so let's listen to the first one here. Kinda Sexy. So he just did the vocal production. Okay. Oh, wasn't found. Probably has been deleted. Okay, so we're not going to look at that one then. And here's the 40-second challenge, which I hope is still up. Yes.
Fighting with myself, think I need a help. All these things and all these rings. Trying to catch up, trying to catch my rap. I'm trying to catch my head, I'm stuck in bed. Look over, I see red, gone for presidents. That's my estimate, telling me intelligence. If I could let it go, I would. If it could be gone, it could. If I could kill it, it should. If it's ghost, it's good. Yeah, I really would. I would. You know what?
That's not bad, actually. It's not bad. It's kind of cool. I like the implied tension in this. Like, it's definitely, there's certainly a certain tension because we don't get the clear, 1 and 3 with a downbeat and backbeat here. I think there's certainly something to this. It feels like it's hovering midair, but I'm waiting for that moment for it to really come down and for that full groove to come out and for us to really go into like, really that hip hop kind of thing, even if it's just like a trap beat or something. But I'm really waiting for the one, for that downbeat on the 1 and the backbeats. I'm still kind of waiting on that. Do you have the drum writing master files right now? Or Alvaro? I'm not sure actually what your first name is because I'm getting so many different names from the email and from Patreon. I'm not quite sure what your actual name is, your first name. Do you have the drum writing master files course? Because that has a lot of stuff which I think would be really interesting to you. Like just, I'm going to do an update to that next year sometime to explain more a little bit how grooves work and stuff like that, like electronic beats, because mostly it's focused on actual acoustic drums right now. But that I think is would be a good address for you still, like to understand a little bit more how a basic groove works. I think because that I still think is a little bit of an issue. And while this groove here is really interesting, you can't stay there forever. I think it's just going to drive people nuts if that is your whole song, because it is still very torn apart. And while that's really cool for a couple of seconds, I mean I got annoyed about it like right around here, I think, or maybe here. You know, it just after a while I'm just like, okay, now resolve it, like do something with it, and come back to it later, and then build the tension, then come back, and then. You know, but you have to intersperse this with a proper groove so we can feel what normal is before we go back to something like this, if that makes any sense. But yeah, I think this is pretty cool. Like this is definitely a step up. Like again, I wouldn't listen to a whole song like this, but for one section in a song, I think really cool. I like the little ting there. I think that was pretty fun. So yeah, good going, man. Good going. Now, again, next step, full grooves. That's what you should be working on. So start listening to some of your favorite tracks and just listen to the drums. That's really what you should focus on right now. Maybe, until next time, here's your next challenge. Until next time, listen to your favorite song and rebuild that drum groove. Just the drum groove. No bass, no nothing if you don't want to. Just the drum groove. Make sure you rebuild it note for note. And just really listen to where things fall on the beat and where everything goes. All right? So that's your next challenge. All right. Moving on, we have a song by Conrad Barsky. I took detailed account of all your feedback from my song when making this new track. Immortality, this the one we just did. Okay, so we're done with this post here, and now we just have about 1,000 songs left from the post that I did today, which is oh, okay, so we already did London Dreaming, so Felipe just posted it again, so that's good. And Alvaro also posted a song again. Okay. Oh, maybe he posted another song for the teaser. He did. Okay, so we can actually listen to the vocal production that he did. All right, let's listen to that first.
Walk into 2019. I was just 19. So, where did we walk? Where did we talk? Funny how you walk. Super sexy how you walk. I'm a man, not a dog. I think it's lovely how you walk. I'm so in love with you. Sexy how you walk. I think it's lovely how you walk. I'm so in love with you.
Cool, man. Yeah, I think, see, as soon as you have a groove going under that, I think it works a lot better because your vocal productions are actually fairly creative and you're doing it. Now I can hear that, you know, you're actually doing a couple cool things with your vocals. So the way you like affecting those is actually pretty cool. I think there's a little bit too much, I'm not sure if it's flanger or phaser or chorus or whatever it is on your voice. I think you could probably do with a little bit less or maybe none even. I think because the vocals sound a little bit fuzzy, a little blurred, and I don't like that. I think it could sound a little bit more present. And also the dynamics are a little bit wobbly. So it's doing this a little bit too much instead of like just being really up close. There's some moments where I still hear some clear cuts. So you should be working with fade outs and fade ins a little bit more to get rid of those clicks. Unless that's a creative decision, because I've heard that done before as well in songs where those cuts were used as artistic expression, basically saying, I don't even give a shit. Like, I'm just gonna cut this as much as I want this, and if the clicks are in, I don't care. You know, it's sort of like a whatever kind of attitude. That can be quite cool, and it's a very postmodern way of thinking about it. So that's certainly an option. If you like it artistically, you can leave it in. Typically, though, I'm just telling you the standard formula for this. You probably want to take those clicks out. Because it used to be an absolute no-go in the past, because it could, I'm not sure actually why, but I think some speakers reacted badly to that kind of stuff, or it doesn't work on certain speakers, or compressors don't work with it well. Like if it goes on the radio, it's going to duck out your track or whatever. I'm not sure what's going to happen there, but first of all, you can hear them. It's not nicely edited, so any professional producer will hear them immediately and just raise an eyebrow. But you might not care about that. Maybe you're saying like, yeah, this is postmodern. Like, I don't give a shit what anyone before me did, and I'm just going to do my own thing. And then that can be quite cool. You know, it's a decision. Again, it's not something I would do, as with the previous song that we just did. But maybe that's exactly what makes you you. So it's something to think about. The vocals also sound very low cut. Like, I think you could probably bring in a little bit more low end again. Not saying a ton, because I like the radio effect on your voice. But if you just brought in just a tiny bit more of the low end, it feels very cut right now. And I'm saying this is like maybe 3 decibel, or maybe like moving it back like 100 hertz or 50 hertz even. Just so we can get a little bit more warmth from your voice. I think that would be really nice. And then I think you can probably compress your vocals a little bit more. And you have to make sure that your levels are fairly under control. Because right now it feels just a little bit too all over the place. As I said, the vocals are still doing this too much. Other than that, I dig it, man. It's cool. It's cool because this really shows me what this is where things get really interesting. I think the music that you're producing is still way behind your actual vocal productions, and because I think you have a cool voice, and I think you're doing interesting things with it in terms of production. It's just that when you're starting to produce music, I understand that that's just a whole bunch of steps more that you have to take, and you have to understand how arrangement works, how bass works, how drums work. It's complicated. I understand that. So maybe you should work with other people more to understand how it works a little bit better, and start listening to songs if you want to get that under control yourself. Or if you have friends that would like to work with you, like maybe you have someone here that says like, hey, I'm fine with, working for free if we just do this project together and we're together with the artist. That's fine. You don't necessarily need to produce your own stuff. It makes mostly sense if you're if you're already at a certain level, and I think you still have a lot of stuff to learn. So I would say like I'm not saying that you shouldn't start learning it. I'm saying yes, learn it, but also since you have a lot to catch up on in terms of arrangement, drum writing, bass writing, as I said, and production also, for the music at least. I think the vocal production is okay. Find someone that you can work with, that you can learn from, that can teach you how to work with these instruments a little bit more, that can teach you a little bit more about production. I think that would be definitely a wise decision. I'm not saying stop learning completely. I'm saying like do that parallelly, right? Continue writing your own stuff, but work with someone else also to learn a little bit better how it works firsthand. Or get one of my courses. Those also explain it. Primarily, I would say the best courses to learn that right now is the Drum Writing Master Files, for sure, or the Drum Writing for Non-Drummers, as it used to be called. I think that's probably the best one right now. Yeah. Okay, and the Geek Free Music Production, of course, which you already have. Okay, good. But good stuff here, man. Okay, what's next? We have a song. Oh, cool. Felipe says, and if you have the time, the last one finished just yesterday. Again, it's a demo, and it's called Hold On. All right, cool, Felipe. I'm all down for doing another one.
They say that it's impossible, that you will never leave this place. You hear them talk behind your back, an iron voice inside your head. Hold on, love. What you dream is what you get. The city noise, 'cause it sounds like loneliness. Now there's a fire that builds inside yourself. Let it burn across the earth.
Dude, you're such an interesting artist, man.
Hold on, love.
And really interesting producer as well. I have a producer that you should work with. Cool, man. Didn't expect that from you. Very nice. Very cool. Cool backing vocals, man. That's cool. Dude, that is a very interesting production. That is a very interesting production. And I think of all of the songs that you sent me, again, I said this with the last song, I think the production is holding it back. I think it could be better, this one as well. But you are a very interesting producer, and I think with this song, that really comes through. I think you have some really interesting, you make some really interesting decisions for effects, for the tones that you're using for that piano that is like super wobbly and all that, which I think you could probably be a little bit overdone, even a little bit more crackle in there and stuff like that. Because I think there's some in it, but you know, you could overdo that a little bit more. You could get a little bit more of that analog vibe in there. I think the whole thing needs a little bit more analog vibe in general. Like it could sound a little bit warmer, could crack a little bit with some analog saturation, I think. But man, this is so nice. There's so much talent here. It's not, again, the songwriting is really, really nice, flawless as far as I'm concerned. I think it's, and again, it doesn't follow the rules. Like I'm not saying this is how you should write a song, because I think this is how you should write a song. I think for you it's perfect. I think you really understand what you need to do to deliver a great song. And there's so many good ideas in here. So many really interesting things. So many things that I didn't expect from you. I think it's just filled to the brim with clever ideas and fascinating harmonies and sounds, and then that drum groove in the middle of it, which I really didn't expect, and how you incorporate it into the song so that it makes sense is just really cool and very clever. It's very unusual too, so it's, again, but it's riding that line between commercial and indie, I think, really, really well, because it's never overbearing, it's never overloaded, it's never going too far in one direction, I think. Very cool. I have a producer that I think you should work with. If you contact me through Patreon, maybe I'm going to contact you first, but contact me through Patreon, please, and I will give you his name, because I think he would be a really good producer for you. I think. I'm not sure. I haven't actually worked with him personally, but I have heard productions from him, and I think he's really good at taking something like this. I think he might be a really good guy for you. I'm not sure how expensive he is, but I know he's done very good work in the past. I've heard befores and afters, and I think he did terrific work on it. So I think you should really work with someone who really knows what they're doing. And because, man, there's so much here. There's so much here. Fantastic, dude. That's the doorbell. Joanna's going to get that. I'm fine. Very nice. I don't even know what to say about this. I just think it's just so cool, because it feels like you're exploding creatively. It feels like you've been working in an office for the last 10 years and you've suppressed your artistic instincts, and now after 10 years you're like, you know what, used to really love making music, I'm gonna make an album. And it feels like you're just like a volcano, you're just erupting with ideas, and there's so much stuff in here that I'm just like, how can someone write so many interesting things into 4 songs that I've heard from you now? I think it's just really cool, and I think every single one has been very interesting, and there's just so many ideas in it. I mean, yes, you have a style, but the cool thing is your style allows for a lot of really interesting things, and it never feels like you're leaving your style with all of those crazy ideas that you have. And they are crazy. They feel like you're constantly redefining yourself, but in really interesting ways that all tie together with that image that I have just from listening to your music right now. Fantastic work. I'm really happy with this. I just really want this to be a great fucking production, and I really want this to sound fucking great. So work with the right producer. I have a suggestion. If you don't know someone, please get this into the right hands and make sure that this is released properly. All right. Good. So how about we look into the live chat? If you guys have any more questions, since this is the last, I think we did all the songs now. Let me check one more time. I think we did. The only one I didn't do was Grayson Earhart's song, which I'm going to do a separate live stream after this, just for that one. Let's look into the chat, though. Is there anything going on here? Pale Blue Dot, that's what it was. What did I say? Ocean Blue or something? Okay, let's check it out. Got a Ghost in the Shell vibe from the song. Probably talking about... Could be more dynamic, though. I'm not sure which one you mean. I really appreciate the idea of leaving the reverbs for the final process. I'm kind of addicted to delays and reverbs, and they usually end up muddying everything. Yes, good point, Felipe. Another subject. Would you recommend to do mastering on crappy speakers before listening to good ones? It's a back and forth, really. Like, I don't just... I mean, I don't do mastering myself because it's a very complicated issue. I always have someone else do that. I don't have any faith in my mastering skills personally. But the preferred way of doing things for mixing, at least for me, is to definitely monitor on both. So when I'm mixing, I'm constantly going back and forth and listening to the other speakers. How does it sound here? Oh, okay, you know, we're missing some low end here, or we're not hearing the bass, so we have to do something about that. Going back, and especially with those tricky instruments like the kick drum, like the bass, that's constantly when I'm going back and forth. With the vocals, when I fit the vocals into the mix, I really want to make sure that they are still audible and that you can hear all the words, that you can understand the words on the small speakers as well. So it's a constant back and forth. I primarily mix on the big speakers, but I would say when I'm really down with mixing, it's probably 60-40 big speakers versus small speakers. Looking at the waveform, it lacks dynamics. It doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily. It's sometimes hard to say. Yes, that can be an indicator, but it's also part of it might be that it's just mastered. So if you listen to like some really properly mastered songs, they're also going to look like this. And yes, sometimes that can be a good indicator. If I know that someone doesn't have that much experience, like if you can see like, because there's these kind of curves that kind of do this, where you can see that there's dynamics in there, but it just stays like that the whole time. And then there's curves that are just like that, where it's just basically flat. They're usually just mastered already. And then it's really hard to say whether they're actually, if they lack dynamic. You mean the acoustic guitars? What was about the acoustic guitars? Felipe says, wow, man, I'm so available to work. Cool. Thanks a lot, Beatmaster. Cool. Grayson says, just caught this live stream notification and thought you were going to do it on Saturday for some reason. Are you going to do the songs from last Saturday? Yes, I did all of the songs from last Saturday. Grayson, for you personally, I'm going to do another video after this because you sent in a song that is copyrighted, and I'm worried that if I do it in this live stream, it might get taken down. I don't want that to happen, so I'm doing a separate live stream after this where we're just going to talk about your song. And if the video gets taken down, at least not everyone who has submitted their songs for this episode is going to suffer from that, if that makes any sense. So in the future, please don't send in covers. This is for original work only, because YouTube has a problem with that. It's not for me. Like, I would be fine if this was a private consultation, or if we're doing this in a live workshop or something like that, then it really wouldn't be an issue. It's just that on YouTube, there are certain rules that we have to follow, unfortunately. And rightly so. You know, fair is fair. Felipe will contact me. Glad to hear it, man. All right. Grayson says, I feel like I missed a lot because I got here late. When will that live stream be? Well, we're doing it right now, and it's the last one of the year, unfortunately. You can just rewatch the whole thing. Like, you can even what do you call it? Reverse back, rewind. That's the word I was looking for. Sorry, posted my comments when you have played the track before. Oh, sorry, the acoustic guitars in London Dreaming. You said they were a bit too heavy. We'll definitely look into it. Did I say that? The acoustic guitars in London Dreaming. No, Let me check that out again. I don't remember talking about acoustic guitars. Was I? I think it was the kick drum, right? That was the issue? Let me just... how do I get back into this? Because I already closed the site. Let me just go back. I could just type it in up here. London Dreaming. There we go. All right. Let's check that out one more time. That was the song with the... Yeah, it's just the kick drum. Yeah. So for London Dreaming, it was the acoustic guitar is fine. Did I say anything about the acoustic guitar? I think the acoustic guitar is fine. No, it's really just about the kick drum. There's just too many kicks in there. I said guitars also, did I? I don't know what I meant by that. Because the electric ones start... Oh, and the chorus in the middle. Right. Oh, they're too fuzzy. There's just too much noise going on there. It feels like they're just too distorted, or the sound isn't cutting through enough. It feels like it's just a little bit too much of that, you know. And so the balance between tone and grit isn't there yet. That's what I was talking about. So it needs a little bit more tone. I've been guilty in the past of using too much tone and not enough distortion. That's something I'm remedying right now, as you heard in the live stream last week that I did on the main channel. My guitars now are fairly distorted for my rock tracks, but for a very long time I had almost clean guitars even for my metal stuff, and I'm kind of learning to use gain now. But I think that works in my songs because I have very few instruments. It's basically 2 guitars, bass and drums, and then vocals. So that works, I think. But if you have so much stuff as I think you really have to cut down on a lot of those things. Like everything that you're adding to your stuff, everything, like including reverb, including delays, including the distortion, including effects, everything, every new instrument, of course, as well. All that is going to add to the clutter. And you have to be very careful, especially with busy songs like you have. You have to be extremely careful with what you put in, and you have to be very selective. Okay. So, and a lot of the times, if you were to send this to a really fantastic mixer, right? If you get it back and you were to listen to the individual tracks, you would be surprised by how little is in there actually. Like, for example, that harmonica would just be like a frequency. Like, it would sound horrible on its own, but if you put it into the full mix, you're going to hear like, oh yeah, you know, you don't actually need those frequencies and those frequencies and those frequencies. You say I usually go with too many instruments. I really have to work on that. I think it's actually really cool what you're doing, and it's a style. You know, I mean, I really like what you're doing. I really don't mind it. I mean, I'm not saying all of your songs have to be that way, and it would be nice to have like 1 or 2 songs or maybe 3 on your album, if you're gonna do an album. I'm not sure. That are just like stripped out and just simple songs. That would be really nice to have that as well, just to balance it out a little bit. Because if every song is so full and gets so crazy rich in the end, like the ones that I've heard so far, even though that's really cool and really fun to listen to, I think after a couple of songs we're gonna get tired of that. So it would be nice to have some songs that are just simple, where really the song speaks for itself and the arrangement doesn't have to hold the song, which isn't really true, because I think the songs would work without all that glitzy stuff on top of it. But it would be nice to have some songs that remind us of that the writing itself is really solid as well. Is Zulu in the HS Discord? I have no idea. Sorry, Beatmaster. Yeah, so I don't think it's something you have to work on because it's part of your style, and I think it's what makes you cool because that's what makes it sound so overboarding and so creative. It sounds like your volcano head is erupting, which is a good name for a band, actually, Volcano Head. So yeah, I mean, balance it out. Like, have some songs that are super stripped out just to show that you can do that as well, and have what you're doing right now. I think that's really great. Okay. Anything else? If you guys have any more questions, we can answer those now. Otherwise, I think I'm going to move on to the next live stream. And we're going to do a Grayson's cover here. Any more questions, everyone? Whew. Man, I'm just looking at that number here again. 61 episodes. It's just completely mental. We have to do like a big something during the 100th episode. That's got to be like a friggin' celebration, man. We have to figure something out there. All right, no more questions so far. So I would say let's stop it right here. We're going to do another live stream, which might take a little while because YouTube is a little iffy with that. It's a little bit difficult to do 2 live streams directly following one another. But can I give you a new link? Yes, you can. If it's not if it's an original song, yes, you absolutely can. So Grayson, should we talk about your cover, or do you want to stick with, or do you want to send in something original? Because again, the cover we would have to talk about in a different video. But I have the link. Like I still have the link here for your SoundCloud song, Morning Bear, right? And if you guys want, I promise I'm not going to talk about anything important anymore. So if you guys want to tune out right now, that's fine. Cover, please. Okay, I wish I had an original ready. All right, we're going to do the cover. See you guys in a couple of minutes. Until then, stay gefährlich. And Merry Christmas, I guess. Cheers.